Hi, everybody. It's Dale Walsh, the Poetic Warrior. Today we're honored to have Kerry Burr, a Human GPS from England, and we'll get on with the show as soon as we do the intro. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it, and hope everything going well with everybody today. And as the new tradition is, I'm going to start with a poem that's called "In Love with Personal Goddess." And thank you for joining us, Carrie. Let me just get this poem out of the way, and then we'll join you. So the poem goes, "In Love with Personal Goddess." You are the prototype of the divine feminine, a holy creation about to transform the world from chaos and strife to a pure, renewed bliss. Even as our love daily becomes more mature, sleeping every night in the other's sweet embrace, waking each morning to the joy of mutual delight, expanding until the new dawn into erotic adventures and a respect for the pain we both have endured while knowing we are blessed by Lord Jesus above, who worked all our lives to create the communion of our souls into a greater sphere of understanding, of love that on earth has never been actualized. For you have given me a logical reason for existence, previously hidden from me in my psychotic past, of a meaningless life in idiosyncratic apartment, when I suffered loneliness of a sullen solitude, until the radiance of your internal illumination dispelled the former darkness of my solitary life. So then that's what I got for you today. I hope you like it, and welcome, Carrie. How are you?
Thank you, Dale. I'm very good, thank you. And I did enjoy your poem there. That was lovely.
Thank you. And just to, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, but just to give an audience an idea, you're a often guest on Mental Health Warrior TV, and you're known as the Human GPS, which we'll explain in a little while. But just wanted to say thank you, and I hope you're having a good day.
Thank you, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Yes, it's just gone 8 o'clock in the evening here in the UK. And I'm having coffee, and just in case, I see I've got my Las Vegas mug here,
I
which
see that.
I actually bought from Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. And the coffee doesn't keep you awake at night?
No, I'm used to it now.
That when I drank coffee, I was the same way. I would like go over to the local diner at 11:30 at night and always have like 2 cups of coffee and then come home and go to sleep.
I love it. I love it.
So,
Brilliant.
just to give why don't you give like a little background of yourself? I know maybe people may have seen you before on on Warrior TV, but why don't you just give a brief background and actually, well, I'm going to ask you about the Human GPS, and now you got that name, but why don't you just give us a little background about yourself?
Okie dokie. So yes, my name's Kerry. I am known as the Human GPS, although that's sort of the name of my business as well, because I'm a master NLP practitioner and coach, a master timeline therapist, and a master hypnotherapist. And I've always had a desire to help other people in the best way that I possibly can. Um, I didn't really know, not for a very long time, in exactly what capacity I wanted to be able to help others. But it quite quickly, sort of in my early adult years, I suppose, it quite quickly became obvious as to how I needed to help people, how I what my purpose is basically. But in as small a nutshell as possible, quite a number of years ago, I found myself in a relationship and an environment that was unhealthy. It was toxic. And after I decided to remain in that environment for, it was getting on for 6 years at this point, I experienced a nervous breakdown. So I lost 24 hours of my life, as in there's a 24-hour period of my life that I remember absolutely nothing about. And for the few months that followed that, after visiting my doctor, I was diagnosed as being severely depressed. He attempted to treat me with antidepressants. They didn't agree with me, so I stopped taking them. And I had a couple of assessments after being referred to the local psychiatric ward at the local hospital. The outcome of that was that I should have psychotherapy, not just counselling, but psychotherapy. And I was supposed to have an hour a week for a minimum of 12 months.
Now, this is because of the assessment of the hospital, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, what was interesting was the fact that whilst they considered that my case was serious enough to have psychotherapy, I was still expected to wait about 6 or 7 months before I had my very first psychotherapy session. So, there was me wandering around a little bit like a zombie, really. It was like wading through real thick mud, but it was like everything was foggy as well, and I kind of struggled to function for a while there. But gradually I sort of realized, I started waking up. I realized that, I couldn't continue living like this. My life had to change. It had to change for the better. And I also realized that the only way that was going to happen was if I made those changes. So I got myself back to work. And then later that same year, I was given the opportunity to relocate with the company I was working for at the time. So I literally, 5 days before I was due to go to my first psychotherapy appointment, I was driving my fully packed car from one end of the country to the other.
Right.
And I literally started again. I never did have any psychotherapy, never had any help. Just simply that action of moving away and starting afresh was enough for me, and it felt great. And but it also meant that it gave me then the opportunity to really look at pursuing my purpose, my passion, my desire to help other people. And although it took a few more years after that for me to find the right format with which to help people, it's been quite a journey, and now I'm doing what I love.
So this. How did you get involved? I think you told me that you got involved with NLP, neuro linguistic programming, at the beginning. That's where the beginning of your like therapeutic or counseling career began, right?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the wonderful things about training in NLP was that whilst you sort of partnered up with somebody else that's also training, you take it in turns to be the coach and then be the client. And we were using our own true to life issues. So I got first-hand experience as to how amazing these techniques are. and it helped me an awful lot as well. So whilst I was training, I was, if you like, receiving a bit of therapy as well. So it was great.
Right. So, what most stands out? I mean, we'll talk about hypnotherapy and timeline therapy too. I'm very fascinated about that too. But what stands out most? I mean, NLP is like become mainstream. So, what's the thing that most stands out to you about your training in NLP?
Sorry, repeat that again, Dale. Sorry,
I
you froze
said,
a little bit my end.
okay. I said, what most stands out for you in your training for NLP?
Quite a few things, really. It in a big way, it satisfied my curiosity and fascination as to how or what makes us as individuals tick. Basically, why do we think the way that we do? Why do we feel the way that we feel? Why do we behave the way that we behave? Sometimes, and because we're all very different, aren't we? We all behave in different ways. We can all have a different experience, even though we might be in exactly the same place at the same
Absolutely.
time. So it's so understanding that side of things was absolutely fascinating. It kind of joined a whole load of dots.
Right.
And then of course learning the different techniques and learning where everything comes from and how we can change them so that we're sort of having behaviors, beliefs, thoughts, whatever, that are more useful, more helpful for us, rather than continuing the old patterns that are getting us the same old results, and we don't want those same old
Right.
results. We want different results. So understanding all of that and learning all of that was just amazing for me. It was like, wow, it's not rocket science at all. It's not even well, it is neuroscience, but it's not. Haven't got to be a brain surgeon to understand it. It's just all of a sudden it was like every single light went on, and I was like, wow, absolutely amazing. This is it. This is absolutely it. But I didn't know NLP existed. I'd never heard of it. It was just simply the fact that I was suddenly aware of life coaching, which I
Right.
believe originated from the States anyway, didn't it? Um,
I think so. Yeah.
and then it kind of came over here, and I stumbled across it and I started reading about it, and I thought, this is how I want to be able to help other people. You know, don't get me wrong, counselors, psychotherapists, they're brilliant people. And I know that they provide an enormous amount of very valuable help for an awful lot of people out there. But for me, I didn't want to spend hours and hours or weeks or months or even years pulling apart significant emotional events and analysing every tiny little aspect of it. What I wanted was something where we could make peace with that particular event, take the lessons from it, lessons that we can take forwards with us throughout the rest of our lives, and actually move forwards proactively and positively. And when I came across life coaching and I looked at that and I thought, this is actually much more hands-on. This is more of what I want to be doing, how I want to be able to help people. And as I was reading into life coaching, I stumbled across NLP and I thought, well, I'll have a look and see what all that's about. And it was like, yeah, okay, this is it then. Let's do this.
So, NLP is very much based upon like being in the present and being in the now, and like
Yeah,
it's sort of like the opposite of psychotherapy, where they like take you through your past and they try to like bring up the traumas of the past and everything. But NLP is much more directly focused on the present, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It is focused on the present, and we tend to focus on the future as well. I mean, not massively on the future, because we've got to be. It's important that we're aware of what's going on around us and in our lives right in this very moment, because this very moment is the only point in time that we have absolute control over. So,
Right.
it's we've been live now for just over 15 minutes. We can't go back to the beginning and change anything,
Right.
So if there was anything that was a little bit iffy or whatever, if something hadn't gone quite right at the beginning, but we there's no point in mithering over it, and worrying about it, because it's happened. But
Right.
what we can do is we can look at it and say, okay, so this is what happened. And the reason it didn't quite work out, this is all hypothetical, by the way, the reason it didn't work out quite as we'd planned is because this happened. So next time I won't do this, I'll do that instead.
Right.
And you carry that with you. So we've learned something from something that potentially, or hypothetically, didn't work quite so well. So, and that's what I mean. We can go back to the past. We can go back to that particular event, but we won't pull it apart. We won't analyze every single tiny aspect of it. We'll just look at it, and we'll take lessons, we'll take learnings from it that we can carry forward with us. And I know that you want to know a bit more about timeline therapy, and that's kind of the essence of timeline therapy. So it kind of, but you can bring in a whole load of the different techniques, NLP techniques, as and when necessary throughout that process. And it's an amazing process. So effective.
Well, I'm a little familiar with timelines. I'm not too clear, but I consider myself pretty up on things. But when you said timeline therapy, it's like I've never heard of that. Because is that rather new? Is that like a new development in the coaching world, or has it been around for a while?
It's been around for a while. The concept behind timeline therapy is basically to deal with the 5 major negative states or emotions. So you're looking at anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. Okay. And all of the like the sub states that are linked to all of those. So like disappointment, frustration, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I
And
would propose the sixth, which is shame.
say again, sorry.
I would propose the sixth trait, which is shame, because shame is sort of like outside the sphere of those other 5, and it can have significant, consequences for the individual.
Oh, definitely. I think shame is kind of dealt with under the guise of guilt. I think that they kind of that's classed as like a sub category or
Right.
sub state of guilt. So but basically by going through all of those, it deals with all of them. Now, when I say that it deals with all of them, what we're not doing with that is we're not getting rid of our ability to feel all of those different emotions. What we are doing is we're dealing with, we're getting lessons. We're taking lessons from significant emotional events that have happened in the past where we've experienced one or all of those emotions. Now, what we do is when we take a client through timeline therapy, we take them through and we deal with one emotion at a time. So we always start with anger, and we will I mean, they're doing the work, by the way. You know, me and other people like myself that can use this technique. We're there to guide. So essentially, what we're doing is we're talking to your subconscious mind or your unconscious mind, whichever you want to call it, basically. And so the client that we're working with, they're expected to sort of just relax, close their eyes, and it's almost a trancey or trance-like process. And it's about allowing the conscious mind to rest and allowing the subconscious mind to do the work for you. So, for example, we would start with asking them to tell us when the first event, if they were to know where they first did anger. Was it before, during, or after birth? And the subconscious mind will instantly tell the client when it was. Now, if it's after birth, then it will be before the age of 3. Quite simply because we have no conscious memory of that time, but we are like sponges from birth to the age of 3. We're like sponges. So, you know, and it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting with what some people come back with. But once we've ascertained that, then we can go and do the timeline proper. So as I say, it's about going back to that first event, and it's about observing that first event. Now, you won't necessarily get any actual content from that particular event. It might just be something that's symbolic. Nevertheless, that particular feeling will be attached to that event, and the individual is in control all of the time. So if they're feeling that anger, that emotion quite strongly as they're hovering above the event, they float a bit higher, or, you know, as high as they want to, until they're at a comfortable, when I say a comfortable height, at a height that where the emotion is potentially still there, but it's at a bearable level for them. Or they might wish to go higher so that they can't feel it at all. But the important thing is the learnings that they take from it, because those learnings will be embedded then into their subconscious mind. Their subconscious mind will remember it and will be able to use it at any point in the future when it's necessary to do so. So although it sounds like quite a complex procedure, it's actually very straightforward. And so we'll do this basically for each of those 5 states, and you know, the lessons, the learnings that come out of it are really quite amazing sometimes. You know, really, really lovely things as well. And so once we've done that, once we're quite comfortable and the client's absolutely happy with the knowledge that there is nothing more to learn from that event, then they come back to now floating above their timeline, but they'll stop at each subsequent event where they would need to take further lessons to bring with them. And then once they're back to now, we just do a quick swoosh back in the past to make sure that there's nothing that's been left behind. And then we also do a quick shoot out into the future to make sure that they won't experience it at a similar point in a similar event in the future. But what we're doing, as I say, is we're not eliminating the ability to experience those emotions. What we're doing is we're taking the learnings from those specific events, so that in the future, where a similar event may happen, where they won't necessarily then experience unwarranted and inappropriate anger, sadness, fear, hurt, or guilt, because those lessons will be so embedded into the subconscious that they actually help the individual to realize, to know that, you know, they're in control. They don't need to feel angry about this particular situation because, you know, it's not appropriate, or they don't need to be afraid, or they don't need to be sad about it, or they don't need to feel guilty about it. They don't need to feel hurt about it because, you know, it's okay. It's absolutely okay.
Right. Well, I've listened to a lot of stuff, and basically a lot of people. It's interesting that you say everything that you're aimed at is happened before the age of 3, and that brings up two questions. One is, so you deal with past lives, and the second is, I just think about like Bob Proctor. He was like a big success coach who just died in the United States. And
Yeah.
I was very upset that he died. I thought he was going to live forever, but yeah, I guess nobody does. But he talks about paradigms and how we're basically slaves to the habitual thoughts that we think because
Yep.
of our programming from our infancy.
Absolutely. We absolutely are. You know, it's you've probably heard the phrase, you know, oh, blame the parents.
Right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Blame the parents. They brought us up, or most of us at least, you know, but it wasn't necessarily their fault, because I know that my parents brought me up in the best way that they knew how, in accordance with the beliefs and the values that they'd learned from their parents.
Right.
And of course, their parents had done exactly the same thing with them in accordance to the values and beliefs of their parents. So it can go right the way back through the generations. So it equally, it's something that we could have learnt, that's been passed down through the generations, and we've learnt it that way. But interestingly, as you very rightly said there, Dale, you know, it also can incorporate past lives.
Right. Well, I just, I think ultimately every person is responsible for their own actions, even though they might have been influenced and actually, modeled after their parents. But ultimately, at some point, you have to like take responsibility for yourself and say, I'm not going to blame my parents. I'm not going to blame anything else, because I'm creating my own reality, and this is the reality that, and which is like very hard for some people to do, especially if they were like had a traumatic childhood and stuff, and
Oh yeah.
and but ultimately, I feel everything is out inside out rather than outside in, and
Yes.
everything you perceive and everything that you do is the result of inner motivations and inner drives rather than external drives that you're exposed to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You see, for the most part, we can control what goes on within us, and what
That's
goes
the
on.
only, that's it. That's the only thing we can control.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a pet hate. Okay. And my pet hate has been, certainly over the last couple of years, that there have been an awful lot of posts across the various social media platforms, and so many people have been saying to people, you know, you have the power to be happy. You have the absolute choice to be happy. You know, get rid of those negative thoughts. Think positive thoughts, to the point where the some of those posts were being referred to as toxic positivity posts,
Right.
because we can't possibly be positive 100% of the time. We're human. We're not meant to be positive 100% of the time. And there are going to be things that happen. You know, we're going to wake up and we might have had a bad night's sleep, and we're going to wake up in the morning and think, oh, I wish I didn't have to get up. I wish I could stay in bed another hour. I
Right.
wish I could get more sleep. And, whilst we can turn that around, it's not necessarily going to take away the very fact that we feel tired. And actually, we'd rather not be doing a bit of work. We'd rather just be perhaps sat in front of the TV relaxing and you know what I mean? So it's,
Absolutely. That I mean that's a new concept that I just came. Maybe you introduced me to it, Carrie. But toxic positivity. And I understand. I agree, and I understand that. A person can't be, you know, happy all the time. I mean, for myself, I was blissful. My doctor called I thought my diagnosis for 7 years was psychotic bliss because I was always happy so much. And then when I get depressed, my doctor would say, "Good, now I can work with you." And so, but ultimately, there's a balance and there's a thermostat where, basically, I the heights of bliss that I felt in my psychosis were ultimately, balanced by a despair that I experienced. I mean, a deep despair. It was beyond suicidal. It was just like, there's nothing. I don't want to do anything, and basically, so I was in the hospital and I was just like suffering because, the balance of the positivity that I always tried to maintain and the sadness or the anger or whatever it was that was like at the driving my psychosis. It finally came out and I realized, first off, I realized I'm not God. And then I said to myself, this is a symptom of how sick I am that, I did think I was God for 10 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating actually. Because here's the thing, not everybody's brains work exactly the same way, do they?
Nobody's brain works the same way.
No,
Every
no,
brain is different.
absolutely. And for the most part, it's all about what we've learned in our most formative years, and it's everything to do with the environment that we've grown up in, and it's everything to do with the way that we experience things as well. And it's and those experiences stay with us. They are our memories. Every decision that we've ever made stays with us.
Right.
And everything surrounding that decision, as in the reasons why we made that decision at that time, stays with us. I mean, there's lots of different reasons as to why we do the things that we do, feel the way that we feel, behave the way that we behave. But I also know that some people, when they're born, the chemicals in the brain itself are imbalanced, and
Right.
it can be quite a struggle to get those back into balance. And this is where a lot of the medication comes in, I believe, isn't it?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it just I mean, ultimately, I look at this point in my life after 46 years of being on a schizophrenic path. I just look back and say, this is what my soul wanted. I mean, people say to me, like, you're amazing. And it's like very nice to hear that. But it's just like, I just went to recover and I did what I had to recover. And my soul was strong enough to be able to see that occur. But ultimately it was like, I mean, I chose my illness, I chose my parents, I chose my environment. And when I was at the height of my psychosis, I would like talk about biogenetic predestination and how all of history was just leading up to me. so so basically, with Dale as God, it was leading up to Dale being God, and my revelation and my psychosis and everything. So ultimately, it's just like you, I mean, at some point you have to take responsibility for your own circumstances. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you're right there, actually. You know, we do have to take responsibility for ourselves and for the things that we do, the consequences of our actions. But I love what you said there, Dale, about, you know, the fact that we chose our parents, we chose to experience certain things in this existence. I do truly believe that. I know many others that truly believe that as well. You know, I know a lot of people that think, you know, I'm a bit mad for thinking things like that
Right.
because they don't. But
Well, it's a big leap from being saying that everything I create my own reality, but then saying that means I take responsibility not only for the things I've done, but for everything that's happened to me. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up because
yeah.
they can't say, I have no power over the external, and but ultimately you do. Ultimately everything comes from within, and everything you see and do and feel, and everything that acts upon you, and that that ultimately happens to you is your
Mm.
responsibility too. And I think that's a big pill for a lot of people to swallow.
It is a massive pill for a lot of people to swallow. You know, I mean, people can some people can be quite astonished when I say to them that you know I I can't necessarily say that I consciously asked or manifested being in the toxic environment that I was in for a number of years. But then I also believe that I must have agreed to experience that, to learn. There's something that I needed to learn from that, because the instant that I moved away, it was like forgiveness, complete forgiveness, you know? And I realized instantly that I couldn't blame anybody else for what had happened. I couldn't blame anybody for the fact that I'd been stuck there for nearly 7 years, and I couldn't blame anybody else for me experiencing a nervous breakdown, because I chose to be in that environment and I chose to stay there. And so equally, when the time came, I chose to leave. And so I
Right.
did leave, you know. And what I realized, that as soon as I left, I realized that, and it was like, wow, okay, no, this is cool, I'm cool with that. I completely accept and take full responsibility for everything that's happened. Yeah.
But that takes a lot of courage, Carrie, and I think that people just aren't ready to really see how the matrix works, how the how the quantum soup works, where everything, we're all one, and we're all involved with one another, and ultimately, there is no reality except the reality that you make. And if you're living in a reality that's unacceptable, then I'm not going to say it's your own fault, but you've chosen to live that reality until you choose to get out of it.
Exactly. You know, it's in the NLP world, we'd call it cause and effect, you know, and it's, as you say, it's taking full responsibility for the outcome of your actions. You know, as I said, I could have blamed other people for me being in that environment. I could have blamed the other person for behaving the way they did towards me, you know, and everything that happened to me as a result of that. But as I said, I chose to be there and I chose to stay there. So the only person I can blame for any of that, for me experiencing any of that, is me. because of the
I,
decisions that I made.
I think, some people would like to blame the soul, and they say, well, I went through this, I accept responsibility for it, but I was only acting because this is what my soul wanted to do. So they blame their soul, and I think that's counterproductive too, because
Yeah,
you should want to work in harmony with your soul, and the lessons that you learn. I've learned incredible lessons because of my schizophrenia, and I've come out the other side, and really flourished. And I joined a company that, financial literacy company, and I'm working at that. And my coach says, I find it funny or amazing that you're doing insurance salesman. You're doing insurance work, and it's like, well, it's all part of the past. And
yeah,
there's the soul. You got to realize that no matter what your experiences are, the soul is looking out for you.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, I mean, I know I used the word blame there, and I can only blame myself, but I prefer to actually not use that word blame, because I think with blame, you've comes the connotation of almost sort of like beating yourself up
Right,
about it. You blame yourself for it, so therefore you feel badly about it. And I chose to accept. I realized that the reason those things happened and happened to me for so long was because I chose to be there, and I chose to stay there. I made those decisions. Nobody else. Nobody forced me to be there. Nobody forced me to stay there. Nobody told me that I couldn't leave at any time. I told myself that, because that's what I believed. But I was telling myself that. But as I say,
right,
once I made the decision to move away, and the day that I actually did that, I realized all of this. And I didn't blame myself. I didn't beat myself up for it either. I just accepted that, quite simply, that was obviously something that I had to experience and learn from.
absolutely.
Um, and so that that act of forgiveness, forgiving the other person and forgiving myself, although it took a bit longer to forgive myself, but certainly forgiving the other person was very easy. And forgiving myself was a little to take a bit longer. But when I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about forgiving somebody else for the way they've behaved towards me. I'm not saying that what they did was okay. I'm not saying that at all, because it wasn't. But that's their issue to deal with. By forgiving, I'm literally cutting that emotional tie. I'm getting rid of the emotions that were attached to that particular situation and to that period of time. Because if I didn't, the only person that it's going to hurt is me, nobody
Absolutely.
else.
Well, that's an interesting perspective on forgiveness, and I think it's one that people are coming to see more and more. Is that you don't forgive the other person for what he did or she did or anything. You're really forgiving yourself for, for whatever traumas or problems that you had, and just saying, I'm going to forgive this person. I might not even have anything to do with him or her again, but I'm going to forgive, because by forgiving, I'm forgiving myself.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also about being able to wish them well as well.
Right.
There was no, because I'd moved away. I'd got away from something that wasn't serving me, that wasn't helping me, something that was unhealthy. But it wasn't just unhealthy for me; it was unhealthy for them as well.
Absolutely.
Um, so it wasn't just, there wasn't just one person in that room. There was two. There was two in that environment. Um, and because I knew that in the long run, it would be much better for them as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't completely innocent throughout the whole thing, because there were times where I'd stand up for myself, and I'd do my best to stand my ground. I was never violent, but there was a lot of verbal exchange, and quite a lot of the time it would be quite upset, quite angry verbal exchange, not nasty from my side, but just from attempting to stand up for myself, if you like. But it as I say, it clearly wasn't healthy for either of us. But it took several years for me to see that.
Well,
So
I think when people feel they can control you and they're controlling you, that if you fight back, that's where the anger comes from, because it's sort of like, well, how can you ask for control of your own life when I'm loving you through, I'm controlling you through love, and it's just like, and everybody justifies it to themselves that way, everything I'm doing for love, but that doesn't take away the toxicity of the situation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very interesting, actually. Look, when I look back at it sometimes, and I mean, I have absolutely no bad feeling whatsoever, about all of that time. If anything, I'm almost grateful for it, because it's helped make me who I am today. It helped me realize exactly how I wanted to help people, why I wanted to help people, and the kind of people that I want to help. And it gave me that. The nervous breakdown was my wake-up call,
Right.
basically. I think I mean, quite extreme, I know, but if that hadn't happened, I do wonder how much longer I might have stayed in that environment.
Well, speaking about nervous breakdowns, I've had like 15 hospitalizations in my life, and
Bless
you
you.
know that everyone was a wake up call. That I had to change course and everything. But one thing that I'm thinking that came to my mind is this is a story. George Carlin, the comedian, right?
Yeah.
Well, he was hosting the Tonight Show, and Vincent Price, who's like the famous mysterious actor.
Mm.
He came on to like pitch his new series on TV, and it was like called The Train or something. And Vincent Price was the conductor, and he would like give everybody a chance to like take go back to the one moment they feel change their lives and redo that moment. So he said, "Isn't that a fascinating idea?" And George Carlin thought about it and said, "No, I don't think so. I wouldn't change a thing, because it's
Yeah.
all work to make me the person that I am now, and I love myself."
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
uh, so, so you said there are well, maybe we should get on to the hypnotherapy. And what would you say your greatest lesson from the timeline uh, uh, therapy is?
I think that probably the greatest lesson really is that it's okay to forgive yourself. It's okay to forgive myself.
And
You
is it
know,
essential? It's essential. It's not
absolutely,
only it's
it is.
okay, it's essential.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think everybody people say the hardest judge of yourself is yourself. And people have to, I'm not saying they have to, but people are going to be much better if they like can leave behind the judgment of themselves and just accept it's all part of the journey of their life. And I mean, thank Yogi Bear. I don't know if you know who he is, but
yeah.
he was like he created what are called yogiisms, and he would always like talk about things in a bizarre, or not bizarre, but like very humorous way. And
Yeah.
one of his favorite quotes of mine is, "If the world was perfect, it wouldn't be."
Yes. That's brilliant. I love that. I do. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I just thought you might like be able to explain the human GPS and how you got that name from the Mental Health Warriors. And uh, so, what do you want to tell us about how you're the human GPS?
Okay, so right. When my mum was still with us, the last few years of her life, she had dementia, which is evil. It really is evil. And my dad was pretty much her full-time carer, and he was the one that was getting a bit frustrated on occasions because, for example, she perhaps asked the same question 3 times in the space of 2 minutes, for example. And he couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand why suddenly she couldn't remember how to do this, or that she'd lost the ability to do, that she doesn't understand certain things. And because I think because it all happened really, really quickly as well. So I sort of explained to him that, with dementia, with Alzheimer's and dementia, that the brain is affected, the way it works. The neural pathways some will get blocked, some will not have that connection anymore. And for whatever reason, it's deteriorating, something's happening and it's cutting off that connection. So there will be certain parts of the brain that will be increasingly difficult to actually access and get the right information from. And I had sort of explained to Dad that the brain is much like a computer, in that it's only as good as the information that's been programmed into it and the operating system. And if the operating system encounters a few glitches, it stops operating properly. So the computer itself will stop functioning. In fact, mine did exactly that this morning in the middle of a Zoom call, if you ever did. But, and so, of course, it needed a reboot. Now, unfortunately, when you've got people who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, there is no way to be able to reboot their brains. They essentially, that's it. It's just gradually going to get worse and worse and worse. Excuse me, but as I explained today, with our brains, our minds, our conscious minds, our subconscious minds, we can sit there and go, right, where do we want to be? Where do we want our lives to be in, I don't know, 5 years' time? Okay. And we sit there and we think, oh, I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to be living on as an example, a desert island somewhere with wonderful
Right.
golden sandy beach and palm trees, and drinking pina coladas every day, and just working from my laptop, don't have to do much else, and just taking in the sun and all of this. And you might have a few people there with you, for your close family maybe, or friends or whatever. And so you start to imagine this life that you would absolutely love to have. Okay. And then once you've got that in your mind, that all of a sudden becomes your personal destination. Yeah. That's your desired outcome, your destination. So then what you've got to do is go, right, okay, how do I get there? Now, the thing is, you don't have to work out the entire route all in one go. As long as you know the first step, you're okay. you're on the right path. And that's so essentially when you look at a GPS or a sat nav, you put in your desired destination. And although these sat navs, these GPS systems, these electronic devices, they're very, very quick at working out the route. Our brains aren't quite that quick, but they will work it out. The brain will recognize the opportunities as they arise, and it will know whether or not, or which of those opportunities is the right one or the best one to take. Which one is going to get us further
in pursuit of your goals, right?
That's it. So that's kind of where the human GPS originally came from. Plus, I've been working as a taxi driver as well for several years. So I'm used to using GPS systems, sat navs, the little electronic devices, So it's because life is very much a journey, isn't it?
It is. It's more like a taxi ride.
Yes. As long as it's a decent driver.
Right. Well, that brings up. I don't know if we have time for this, but brings up a joke quickly. There's two guys at the gates of St. Peter, and one is like in torn jeans and a torn T-shirt and big beard and everything, and the other one is a priest behind them. So first guy gets up and they say, St. Peter says, "What's your name?" And he says, "Tom Decker." So he looks him up and he says, "Oh yes, Mr. Decker, welcome," and gives him like a big robe and a golden scepter and everything, and says, "Welcome to heaven." So pastor's going, "Wow, what's with this guy?" Oh, and he says, "What was your profession?" And he says, "I was a taxi driver." So then the pastor says, gets up and he says, "What's your name?" And he says, whatever. And so St. Peter looks him up and says, "Oh yes, you're in too. So here's a cloth robe and a wooden sticks to walk with." So he says, "St. Peter, I don't want to be ungrateful, but why did that guy who's in torn jeans and torn shirt and everything, who's a taxi driver, get so treated so well, whereas I've dedicated myself to the Lord, and I get like a little wool robe." So St. Peter looks at him and says, "Well, you as a pastor taught people how to sleep, but he, as a taxi driver, taught people how to pray."
Oh, that's brilliant. I like that. That's not far wrong, actually. I know a few taxi drivers that do.
But
I'm not one, by the way. My driving's not that bad.
I'm sure this wasn't a reflection on you, Kerry. So, but I think our time is just about up. But would you like to give some contact information or anything, or any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if anybody does want to sort of contact me, if it's just for a chat, I'm always happy to chat with people. You'll find me at the Mental Health Warriors Facebook group. Alternatively, you can get hold of me through my website, which is www.thehumangps.co.uk, or you can send me an email, which is kerry@thehumangps.co.uk.
And we have 1 minute left. So any summarizing thoughts or any ideas that you'd like to leave us with?
I think the only thing that I kind of want to say to people is that, what, life is to be experienced. It's to be enjoyed. And, if there's something that you really, really want to do, don't sit there and wait for somebody else to offer you that opportunity. Go out and find it. Go out and do it. Take life with, grab life by both horns and really just go out there and do whatever it is that you desire.
I want to thank you very much for joining me today. It's been very
Thank
enlightening
you.
and I think very informative. And thank you very much. And hope to talk to you soon. And I think we're right at time. So thank you.